Hi, everybody. Thank you for staying this long and listening to me talk. My name is Melody Ma. I didn't know how to code 2.5 years ago, but today I'm going to talk about how I went from not knowing how to code to coding for change. The last 3 words, coding for change, it probably sends shivers up your back. It does mine. It feels like when you're at a beauty pageant and you ask the contestant, what do you want to do? And the contestant would say, I want world peace, right? It would probably remind you of this clip. Oh, here you go. From our lovely sitcom, Silicon Valley. Let's see if this works.
Happen will revolutionize location-based mobile news aggregation as you know it. We're making the world a better place through Paxos algorithms for consensus protocols.
And we're making the world a better place through software-defined data centers for cloud computing.
A better place through canonical data models to communicate between endpoints.
A better place through scalable, fault-tolerant distributed databases with ACID transactions.
And we are...
You get the idea. Everyone who builds an app wants to make the world a better place. But today I'm not going to talk about creating the next Facebook or the next Tesla or the next whatever he was pitching. I'm going to talk about how every one of you here, without having to build the next hit app, is able to nudge the world to a better place with what you already have in your mind, in your heart, and of course, your computer. So I'm going to tell you my story. A couple years ago, I had a quarter-life crisis. I was a product marketing manager for a financial services company. And, you know, as with anybody who is undergoing a quarter-life crisis nowadays, the first thing you do is say, I'm going to sign myself up to a coding boot camp. So that's kind of what I did. And during that coding boot camp, I learned how to use jQuery, yay. And also I did a lot of pixel art when I was a little kid, so I decided to combine my pixel art passion with jQuery and created this little penguin game. And as I was creating this penguin casino game, I thought to myself, why didn't I learn this when I was in high school? How come it took me almost 10 years before I realized that coding is fun and you can make a career out of it? And it's not that hard if you really put your mind to it. So I started looking around and doing some research on whether coding is already introduced in schools right now. Because when I went to school, I took every science class, every social literature class, humanities class, but I wasn't offered computer science. During, I believe this was 2014, if you did a Google search, you saw that the UK just did a massive rollout of mandatory coding in their school system, starting with kids as young as 4. Places like Chicago, New York, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, they were rolling things out. But where was BC? BC was noticeably missing. I looked at all of our Ministry of Education documents, our digital literacy framework, and I couldn't even identify the words coding, computer programming, computer science, computational thinking. Something was missing. So I thought to myself, what if every child in BC, before they left high school, had the opportunity to learn how to code, to learn computer science, so that they don't take the same windy path as I did. So, because this was in December, leading to January, I decided to make this my New Year's resolution, to give every child an opportunity to learn how to code in BC before they leave high school. And if you know me, I make ridiculous New Year's resolution. I usually just never make New Year's resolution or make these gigantic ones. So I decided to make a gigantic one that year. So the first thing I did, first course of action, was of course send a letter to the Minister of Education at that time, Minister Fassbender. I don't think he's in government anymore. And I told him, you know, this is great for jobs in BC. You can close the talent gap. This is great for kids because then they can learn computational thinking and digital literacy skills. And we need to catch up with the rest of the world. So I didn't expect too much from this, but I did get an email back a few weeks or months later, and it was a bureaucrat in the Ministry of Education, and the bureaucrat told me, well, thank you, but no thank you for your ideas. Here's a hodgepodge of things that address your concern, but don't really. And I didn't think too much of it at that time, you know, it's government. But then, a few days later, the same person sent me a new email. And in this email, he said, I'm so inspired by what you did. And I actually went to our digital literacy framework on our Ministry of Education website and saw that, yeah, you're right. There's nothing that mentioned computer science or coding or computational thinking or programming. So then I went inside and I just edited and added those words and uploaded it to the Ministry of Education's website. So all of those yellow lines, that's where he added all of the words. And I asked him, so all along, all these years, someone just forgot to send an email? And that was it? And he said, it's not that simple. The digital literacy framework is just a framework for teachers to assess their students on whether they have reached or demonstrated digital literacy. It's not mandatory. And he told me, if you wanted to do something about it, and if you think this is the right thing to do, why don't you do something about it, and I'll support you in my role within the ministry. So that's what actually happened. First, we decided to go where the community was and place coding programs in libraries, in malls, and just to try to get our feet wet, because at that time, even the ministry was still, oh, I'm not sure what parents will say about coding, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And so we decided to just get our feet wet and see what the response was. And of course, it was overwhelming. Later on, we decided to participate in the Hour of Code event, and I helped lead that for that year. The Hour of Code event is actually a global grassroots event where anybody from 4 years old to 104 years old can go to their website and learn an hour of code in an interactive and fun way. So we did a coordinated campaign with the Ministry of Education, with the BC Teacher Federation, to run an hour of code in BC. One of the marquee events to get everybody rallied up in the province was a signature event called Code Create. We went to 4 different cities in BC, Victoria, Vancouver, Kelowna, and Prince George, and we taught 400 kids how to code. And we partnered with local organizations such as Meta Labs or their Innovation Center to put this event on. And even in Prince George, where's Prince George? There's Prince George. We didn't even have internet, and the kids still loved it. And for Hour of Code in total, we went from 170 grassroots events in classrooms in the previous year to a coordinated effort that generated over 700 events across BC. And so I thought, well, isn't this exciting? Everybody wants this in their classrooms. People are excited. Parents parents are excited, kids are excited. Of course, the premier should get excited, right? And she was, sort of. We invited her to an event. She didn't come to the West Kelowna one. But then, when it did count, she announced, you probably remember this, adding coding to the curriculum in school. Everybody was so excited, especially those who weren't close to the file. But when I saw this announcement, which I was expecting, I immediately went to my phone and texted a tech journalist on the Vancouver Sun and asked her, can you please ask the premier what is the investment, what are the resources they are allocating to this program, what are their plans for this rollout during Scrum. And if you remember, the Minister of Education actually told the media, kids don't need computers to learn how to code. We're not allocating any additional funding to teach teachers how to teach coding. What? So I did a media rampage on CBC and a bunch of publications criticizing why would they announce such a program and not put the proper resources behind it, unlike in the US, in Chicago and New York, where these types of announcements comes with significant resources. And so I also wrote an op-ed that's still online right now, comparing this to another employment scheme like LNG. I wasn't too happy. But 6 months later, this happened. The Premier and the Minister of Education announced $6 million allocated to coding. Actually, it was 4 if you read the details. Yeah, and I confirmed that too. I read the details and I contacted my ministry contacts. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this looks like 4. They're like, yeah, it's 4. It doesn't buy you much. It buys you about 1 MacBook per school in the province. Then a few months ago, earlier this year at the BC Tech Summit, the Premier went at it again and said, coding in K-12 classrooms, celebrating their achievements, and that BC is the first jurisdiction in North America to require coding in classrooms. Just a celebratory, self-congratulatory announcement. That's not true. So then I went again and said, let's do a review of what actually happened over the last year, how we went from no computers to alternative facts. I don't think they were too happy. They did change it in their platform. I read it. But this whole experience has made me realize that you need to engage with the civic process, especially when you have knowledge that all of you have here that may not be in our elected bodies. So I decided to get more interested in politics. A few friends and I meet down in a basement just across the street every week. And during the election period, we were trying to think about ways to change the conversation. And we would create little apps, and one of the little apps that we created was this MLA voting records. How did your MLA vote, whether they voted with party lines or against party lines? We didn't think too much about this app when we first launched it, but closer to the election, we found that people were actually using it to determine whether the Green Party was more aligned with the NDPs or with the BC Liberals. Independent candidates were using that to make a case and refute party candidates when they say that they actually represented the constituents, but when they voted as a bloc. So it started changing public conversations, and we were quite surprised by it. And right now, as a third case study of Coding for Change, I'm working on this campaign on saving Chinatown, and I lead this campaign called Save Chinatown YVR. There's a ton of intense real estate development pressures going into that area that is causing cultural erasure. But when you engage with City Hall, this is the website I've created. When you engage with City Hall, this is usually what they give you, like this table of technical details on urban planning. And they say, well, we want to engage with you. Send us an email about what you think about the new policies. How do normal citizens actually engage this way? You can't. I've been at it for a year and I'm still scratching my head because this is not my forte. So I created this website where if you want to send a letter to the civic body and the city, you can just go on. I would help translate some of these policies and turn it into some check boxes where you would just check what you think. And I try to be as extensive as I can. And then it would generate a letter for you that you can just send directly to mayor and council and the city planners. And this has been extremely useful. Like, almost 500 people would use this tool. But why I brought these 3 case studies up, because it's been a personal reflection for me too, from being in a situation with Hour of Code and Code Crate and working with the Ministry of, using my technical knowledge about education and working with civic bodies that don't necessarily have that knowledge, to using technology and using code to create visualized data to change public conversation, to now using code to create technology that helps others engage with the civic process. So it's been a reflection of a personal journey, but the central theme is how do you use your knowledge, which is something really basic. I mean, even the letter app that I created, it took only a few hours, just a tiny little script that you write, but it has magnitude in terms of impact. So how do you code for change? Even if it's just a little bit, a little nudge, so that society heads towards the right direction. I'm going to summarize it in 5 points. So first, find your passion. That's where the heart comes in. Everything that you saw that I was involved in was because I was passionate about it. There will be times when it will be extremely hard and you ask yourself, why am I even doing this as a volunteer? I could be hiking, I could be traveling, I could be doing so many other things. But passion is what drives you. If you don't have that passion, it's going to be a tough, tough ride, and you're probably going to quit. Secondly, if you do find your passion, whatever it is, assess the situation. A friend of mine, he was talking to me about the Balmoral situation in the downtown east side. And he was saying how they created an app a few years ago to help downtown east side residents find out who the bad slumlords were. And then they realized that that community already knew who all the terrible slumlords were, and that app was completely useless. And he said, the thing I learned was before you start a line of code, assess the situation. Figure out where your skills are actually needed, whether it's participating in an organization that is set up to allow you to leverage your tech skills for change, such as Peace Geeks or Code for Canada, or even some programs within the province of BC, or just going to existing nonprofit organizations or talking to the people that you want to help to figure out where are the processes that might be broken or the areas that you can add tech into to make it more effective and more efficient. but assess the situation so you're not repeating work. Third, be persistent. A lot of people always ask me, how do you set out a vision for something and then see it all the way through? It's not because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's not because, I know more people. It's because I'm persistent. And persistent, along with passion, gets you a lot further than you would without them, right? Because when you want to quit, just take a rest, take a break, but be persistent. If someone says no, go to the next person or ask them again. If someone doesn't reply, and usually when you're working in the nonprofit or volunteer world, people have a dozen things going on. Be persistent. Keep on going at it. Fourth, be strategic. That's very similar to my friend's Balmoral incident. He wasn't very strategic. He could have assessed the situation and then figure out where he can help in the most strategic way. And not everybody's strategic. There was a study about that Harvard Business Review did around CEOs, and employees assessed the top company CEOs, and they found that CEOs are usually either tactical or strategic, right? And not usually both. And sometimes you have rare ones that can do both. Figure out where you are in that spectrum. Are you more tactical? Are you more strategic? If you're less strategic, pair up with people and find a network that can help you with the strategic side, and vice versa. But being strategic will get you a long way. I actually went to a Greenpeace training session just across that classroom, and they were extremely strategic with whatever action that they're going to take, and they call it a direct action. What is that end goal? What is the most strategic and least amount of effort that they can put out in order to get to that end goal to make that impact? So be strategic. And lastly, have fun. Right? I'm for the Chinatown community, we have a network of over 20 people, and we're constantly slacking, because we like each other. We're friends, we hang out, and it's a lot of fun. We actually just went through a 25-hour public hearing at City Hall for 4 days, and we were treating it almost as if it was a party in City Hall, where people were, bringing pizza and bows and chips, as if we're back in high school or something, even though it was something very, very serious. We were with our friends. It was a lot of fun. We were passionate about what we're doing, and that drives us to continue and withstand and, be resilient. So have fun. So those are the 5 points that I'll leave you with today. I've told you my story of how I went from not having any technical knowledge to using my technical knowledge to create little changes here and there. And hopefully that will inspire you to do the same, because you have what you need to nudge society forward. And that's your mind, your heart, and of course, our computers. Thank you.